fits your reality. Because what I would not like is to say, what works in the Netherlands is going to work in South Africa, those kind of things. And I think most people have appreciation for that, but we should look at it. These are the issues we discussed. Most of them I just copied in here. Thought we were going to get another chance, but again we did not, so please.
So, thank you, Helen. So, on your last slide about Monsanto big business, the pharmaceutical industry is also a similar attitude. Why is that people are not aggrieved by that? Is it because it's food? They just feel a handful of global pharmaceutical industries as well, as you see in the seed business, but the backlash against that you hardly ever hear about.
In general, I do agree with you.
Don't like big business. How come we're not on the streets marching against those as well?
In general, I do agree with you. There's definitely, difference between how it's done in both. But there are definitely rumors in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And especially, in South Africa, we had this issue about affordability of medicine. And as soon as that comes up, the big pharmaceutical companies are under pressure because of the money making and all those kind of things. So there is the link. It's not as obvious as in the others. And again, my constant answer to those kind of things is risk-benefit. I mean, if you want to have some ailment treated, you're going to buy that. But you don't necessarily see that. And I mean, we've discussed this a million times, but I still believe this is the heart of the whole discussion today. And it has obviously a lot of inputs and lots of facets, but in principle, that's it.
Thanks, Henny, for your presentation. My question is, all these papers that are they published in peer-reviewed journals? Because how come we get these papers with all these discrepancies and all that they are published? And if they are not published in peer-reviewed journals, what would it take for somebody to then critically analyze all these papers and highlight all these mistakes? Because I think, I don't know, I might be taking it simply, is that our mistake is we look at these things, we discuss them, and we ignore them. But unfortunately, the public out there listens to these things. And if there's nobody who's countering all this information, then the myths grow.
Yeah.
Because it seems, I hear you, Ida, that it was countered, but how come they seem to have a better effect than even the counter, or a bigger effect?
I've got 2 points about that. The first one, it was counted in detail. The problem is how it's communicated then. Yeah. Because remember these things, when you can tell people you're going to get cancer tomorrow, every paper is interested in doing that. But if you have these long-winded arguments about statistics and say, no, this is actually not true, nobody's going to publish it. So that's the only difference. But it has been discussed. I mean, if you go and look at the literature for Saralini, for example, in great detail. The other point I quickly want to make about what you started off by saying peer review. Unfortunately, before peer review, we could have said honesty, or we could have said, we should do the deal on a handshake. But we don't live in that world anymore. Yeah. That paper was retracted from, can't even remember where it was published, but it was retracted, and now the latest news was, just 2 months ago it was republished in a different paper, a different journal, that has, a different type of alignment. You can go and see the different journals. So peer review in itself doesn't really mean anything, and this just complicates the argument. Is that, what impacts that? I think it's a combination, because it's also, I think, oversimplified and a little bit arrogant to say people are following the money or whatever. It's not just that, but it's about building yourself. You understand? If I've published something and I gathered a group of people around me, we have something on the, what do you call it? On the spout. What's it? No, you spell it. You have something to defend it. You understand? You've bargained off your ground. So now it's the battle. It's not more about the initial issue. It's now because It's my honor and it's my, you know, I'm already now dug in my heels. So that's the issue afterwards. Okay.
I've been following the discussion very well from the first day when I asked the person on where, you know, the modifying genes, the sources of the modifying genes, that people should know exactly where this comes from. And maybe they've, you know, tried very much to explain on that one. And then there is the issue of loss of local varieties through gene flow. Back at home, we are trying to promote community-managed seed banks. And then there comes the VT and with our that one is really a worrying issue among farmers. And then there's this other issue of knowledge and education, past experience. We had the issue of gamma-tox DDT, where we used DDT for quite some time as a pesticide maybe or something else. And after years, it was discovered that it is a negative impact on human beings. Now with this experience, that's why we have these problems of saying what will happen after maybe, like you said, 20 years, we will wait for 20 years, but at least this happened. We still need to protect the next coming generation. I have a granddaughter who is only 2 years. 20 years after, she will be 22. Even younger than how I am now. What will happen to my granddaughter or grandson? Such fears really need to be taken note of.
Yes. I'm going to start with the last point you made, because obviously that's a difficult thing to deal with. I mean, you can give other examples as well. Tobacco, people been smoking for many years and everybody was happy. And now it's one of the arguments that's used to say the cancer connection was you know, kept quiet for a long time. I remember one of you made a point yesterday about something. It was the cow, what? The mad cow disease. It's the same issue. I think it will still be an unsatisfactory answer, I think. But the only thing one can do is to analyze something to the best of your current ability. So, in everything we say and see, is that GMs that are commercialized are not more dangerous than the counterparts. Because remember, this is also, it's that counterpart. Because you can argue now, for example, if you only eat the maize the whole time, it's like the argument with the potatoes and the rat. You're not going to be healthy if you only eat the maize. It's got nothing to do with the fact that it's GM, it's because it's about a balanced diet and all those kind of things. So it becomes complicated. To the best of our ability to analyze anybody in the world, the genes can't be safe. You must remember, this is also the point I'm trying to make with that thing to show that we add one additional thing. It's that small change, like Shark said, of course it can have a big influence, but we know what it is, so that is what the focus is. The one part of the focus is on that new gene. And then we have this theoretical background. Remember that gene that we transferred now as well, that new GM component. It's not completely new. It didn't fall out of the air. People didn't create it as completely that we don't know it. We know that protein has been, for BT, for example, it's been in the soil around us forever. So you're exposed to it in any case every day of your life. So there's also that background. So the combination of analysis and then that kind of history of safety, which is a little bit different from, it's the same if you, every day, whatever you eat, cassava or whatever is produced. The only reason why we eat it and we think it's safe is because we've been eating it for many, many, many years. And this is where exactly your point comes up. GM is now new. So you understand what I'm saying? The other thing is, I mean, I also have 2 boys, and I also want them to see, have grandchildren and all those kind of things. But this is my other argument. Again, this is now about you and me, and who am I, to say something. But I have exactly the same concerns that you are. So I think that's an important connection to make. And then quickly coming back to the the local varieties. That's a difficult one for me. Because in South Africa we have the same discussion. The first place is we don't really have information about how many people do what and all of those things to really make a judgment in terms of how big should we look at it. But people often talk about this for maize in South Africa. The first point is maize came into South Africa. So those local varieties, people like them now and they've bred them, but remember they were also new at some stage. The second point I want to make is it's not only the BT maize now that's going to possibly integrate with your local varieties. If somebody comes there, goes to his family that's 2 cities away or something, and he brings that new seed and he plants it, they will also integrate. If somebody comes and says, no, the varieties that you use, the open pollinated ones, only give this much yield, I'm going to buy a hybrid, just the ordinary hybrid. That hybrid's genes are also going to get into your maize. So it's not just because it's GM now that you're going to lose what you have. So if you really want to protect that genetic pool that you have because you really value it for whatever reason, you have to manage it in any case to be almost isolated from the rest of the environment. And in my understanding of how small-scale setups in general work, it's probably impossible. So there will always be genes coming in. If you plant and your neighbor plants something else, the seeds that you keep after this season are not the same ones that you kept last time. And this is one of the reasons, why the local varieties, the open pollinated ones are now produced to obviously have a stable production line. But if you just keep your own seeds the whole time, eventually, that inbreeding leads to a reduced yield. So the last point I want to make is people should then also evaluate. I understand that connection that people have. In South Africa, for example, they would say that the texture, the way that if you, what do you call it, if you break the core, if you pound the maize, some work better than others, and this is why people like them. But in the end of the day, we must also realize things change over time. So will they still want to do exactly the same things, when your children or grandchildren do that? So we must also see what we're doing now in context of how things are going to change over time. But I think the main point is that it's not only because it's GM now that you're going to lose your cultivar. It is how you manage yours, because it will always change with all the other maize that's around.
Okay, I think we need to move on. These are issues that still need to be interrogated. If you really feel there is need for you to get more information, let's keep on discussing. The email addresses are going to be sent around, and then we keep on enriching ourselves so that we can stand on solid ground on these matters. Sometimes what is your fear now, you realize we're just fearing, there was no need to fear. Okay, Imo?
I'm going to talk about the convergence of biotechnology and trade, but not in the sense of broadly, but I'm going to narrow down to regulatory issues. The outline of my presentation is I'll give a brief overview of biosafety challenges and the impact it has on trade, and then I'll touch on issues of challenge in regulating biotechnology in SADC. I will hint on the issues of benefit and drawbacks of regional harmonization from a SADC perspective. Then I will point to the issues that of regulatory challenges. I mean, when you look at both legislative level and also what might happen in the judiciary. Because the point is regulators as well as the judiciary has to deal with issues of integrating divergent norms, which is trade, economic, and social impacts. As much as we want to include all these things into the decision-making framework, there might be challenges because they have convergent objectives at times. So I will look into the difficulties of managing this convergence when it comes to the divergence in these decision-making parameters that we are proposing. And I will then use the Easy Biotech case to demonstrate how regulatory structures, and also the various rules that we adopt fuel this convergence instead of giving clear-cut solutions. Before I do that, I'll just give a brief overview of the WTO and their rules, the ones that are most relevant for biosafety. And then the specific one is the sanitary and the phytosanitary, but I'll also hint on the other two because they are also relevant. Then I'll draw implications for developing countries, which I feel is not that much anymore. So challenges of regulating biotechnology. As we have been discussing throughout the days, we have concluded or we have seen that regulating biotechnology is a complex issue. It is very much multi and interdisciplinary. You draw people from different backgrounds with different frames, frames of references, and also different values, because to what extent can we really be neutral, as was said by Henny? So there are these inherent packages that we bring to the table from a disciplinary perspective, as well as you as an individual having values and having to regulate this complex issue. So that in itself already it's a challenge for regulating biotechnology. And then when you look at international level, there is a host of international rules that applies to this regulatory area. But there are structural problems within this system that also adds to the challenges of regulating biotechnology. One of the issues that I look at in my research is to what extent are these challenges translated into our domestic systems. Right now it is difficult to say to what extent because we don't have cases that our legal systems handle, but I was really excited to see that there are some cases from South Africa that I can look at. But what it says is that we need to understand to what extent the challenges that are experienced at international level can or is translated into our national systems. One of the issues that is being said is that the structural setup of international law and our national legal systems is quite different because you have got a single judiciary, unless the international system that is so much fragmented. But I ask myself, to the extent that different ministries deal with the different fragmented aspects, for example, Ministry of Trade deals with WTO rules and creates a separate instrument, environment deals with environmental rules and create a separate instrument, and then we have fragmented issues from starting from the Constitution up to individual legislation that deals with human rights and social issues. To that effect, could one argue that the national systems are also as fragmented as the international law? So those are the questions that we need to also ask and understand as we are going into taking these things a level.